Well, hello chaps and chappettes, and welcome to a Kickstarter that everybody should... In this Kickstarter, you are an initiate of a tribe who has a proud heritage due to the fact that one of your ancient leaders... Where's Indiana Jones when one of your ancient leaders had transformed himself into a spiritual jaguar to save the village from all the evils in the world. But eventually, all these evils had found a way to destroy his spirit by breaking him into several shards. Now it's your dream to go into the sacred temple and find these shards and restore the spirit of your ancient leader, and maybe become a leader yourself. But the other thing is, several other members of your village have thought the same thing at the same time and decided to go in the same day as you to find the shards. So what's going to happen? You're going to be devious and you're going to lay traps to try and prevent them from finding the shards, so you yourself become the leader in this new game. Where did I put the box lid? Somewhere in this jungle. In this game called Shards of the Jaguar. This video was made possible with the help of Game Toppers. Upgrade your gaming experience with a Game Topper. So before we go any further and I talk to you about an overview of the rules and my impressions of the game, I just want to explain that this copy here is a prototype, and so what you're going to see is some of the components which are prototype components and may differ from the final version or the Kickstarter version. Also, the rules may differ again due to the fact that there might be some changes and tweaks along the way. And the other thing you need to remember is my first impressions of this game are of this prototype, and again, not the final of the version of the game. So there may be a difference in between me having a look at this now and having a look at in a year's time when the game actually comes out. If you want to check out more about this Kickstarter, if you look in the show notes below, you'll see a link there which will take you to the Kickstarter itself. Now, there's that out the way. Let me now go roughly and very quickly through the rules of the game. Players will choose one of the 4 characters, and each character has different abilities. They all have a 3rd level special ability which is permanent, but they also have the chance to collect amulets and have other powers as they level up from level 1 to level 2. They will also have a set amount of life points depending on how many players are playing, and they will also have a number of curses, in this case 4. All the players will start at one side of the board, choosing in turn order which space they're going to start in, and they will gain an amulet. They'll also have their own personal amulet as well as they start the game. There are 6 types of amulet, and each amulet gives a power. Some heal, some give you an extra movement, and some protect you against the flood trap. The game's going to be played over 8 rounds, and for the first 6 rounds, players will have 4 actions each. In the 7th and 8th round, they will have 5 actions each. Also, players will not be able to enter the 4th quarter of the board. There'll be this boundary wall there which will prevent them from going there, because that's where the shards of the Jaguar are hidden. And so for the first 6 rounds, players are going to be running around finding map pieces which lead to these shards, and then in the 7th and 8th round they will have the chance to grab these shards in correspondence to where their coordinates are from the maps that they've collected. Each round is broken into 4 phases. The first phase is the refresh phase, which you won't need to do on the first round, which is to choose the player order. This is normally done with the player who is furthest back on the map becomes the first player. If there's a draw, you look at the scores. Whoever has the lowest score on the score track becomes the first player. And if there's still a draw, then it's the player who last played the nearest trap. The second phase will then see the players in turn order lay traps. Now there are 6 traps. 4 of them are really traps which will do damage. 2 of them are special traps like the flood and the secret door. Only one player can choose one of the traps, and some of the traps have these tokens. You will choose one of these tokens which will correspond to where these traps will activate. So for instance, the dart traps. These will either activate where there are the red arrows, the yellow arrows, or the blue arrows. You choose one of these secretly and place it on your player board. Same goes for any of the other traps, which will do damage. Once the second phase is done, you move on to the third phase, and that's when the players use their action points to do actions. Now, movement is one of the actions that a player can do. They can move from a space to an adjacent space orthogonally, or if they're in a space with a gem, they can collect that gem. If it's a map piece, they can collect that map piece. If they find an amulet crate, they can open it and take 2 of the 3 amulets from it. Or you can spend an action if you are at a ritual token tower. You can spend the gems that you have to activate that ritual. That ritual will then give you the highest ritual points, which will then go into one of your level up slots, leveling up your character. We'll talk about leveling up a little bit later. So instead of moving or taking stuff, you can just run. And this will get you across the board very, very quickly. What you do is you declare you're going to run, which means that you can't do anything else. So if you decide at the beginning that you want to run, that's 4 plus 3, which means that you can move 7 spaces and you can't do anything else. And finally, something which should never be forgotten, but sometimes is forgotten, is you can heal yourself. You can spend a number of action points to gain life points. Now this may be more important in the more experienced level of the game rather than the basic level of the game, but everything helps keep points at the end of the day. And then finally, the fourth phase is the trap activation phase. This is where you will have some fun. The traps will activate in order from left to right. Whichever player had set that trap will reveal which token they have chosen, and the trap will activate on all characters that are in that space. For each player that falls into your trap, you'll gain a glory point, and they will take the damage as indicated by the trap. If you fall in your own trap, you too will have to take that damage, but not gain any points. There is also the earthquakes, which take place in a whole column across the board depending on the number that you've chosen. Players will take various amounts of damage depending on the trap. They may even be cursed, or they may even be stunned, which means that they lose an action point on their next turn. The final 2 traps which do no damage are the secret door, in which a player will then place a secret door of their token anywhere that they want, and then place a second one 4 spaces away from there. That player and only that player can use that secret door as long as it is still on the board. If another player decides that they want to activate a secret door, the previous player will have to remove their secret door. And finally, there's the flood, which the player that chose it will choose one of the 4 directions, and flood waters will gush in that direction, pushing all players 2 spaces in that direction. So up against walls, you could be safe. And again, if you set the trap, you could be safe as well and just only move 1. And those are the 4 phases. You'll repeat this 8 times, and at the end of the 8th round, you will conclude who has the most points by counting up how many gems you have, and each gem set collection is different. You will gain points from your point track. You will gain points from your life point track. And plus, you'll add on any ritual tokens that you have performed during the course of the game. But you will also lose points if you have curses. You'll lose a point for each curse that you have. If you are the player with the most curses, you lose an extra 6 points. And you'll also lose an extra 3 points if you're the second with the most curses. Whoever has the most points at the end of the game will be crowned the new leader of the tribe. So let's talk about my first impressions of the game. I've played the game twice. I've played it as a 2-player game and as a 3-player game, and they play a little bit differently. The 2-player version of the rules at the moment are basically players' turns are broken in half. So they basically they set a trap, and then they perform 2 actions. They set a second trap, and then they perform the rest of their actions. And this is very, very stop-starty and kind of slowed the game down personally for me. Whereas with the 3-player game, you play all of your actions in one go, and the game felt fluid. The game moved a bit more quickly. Let's talk about the setup now. The setup will be different depending on the number of players. Also, what version of the game you're playing, because there's 2 versions of the game. There's the full in-game, and then there's like an introductory kind of version of the game. Now, the introductory version removes the leveling up of the characters, and it also removes a bonus stage after you've played the 8th round, which is to escape the tomb, the castle. It's not a castle, it's a temple. That's the word I was thinking of. Zipping back to the extra bonus round after round 8, where you have to try and escape. This is really interesting because it depends on how many health points you have, is how many spaces you can move on this bonus round. So this kind of like adds an extra kind of puzzle calculative element to the game. The game is very calculative. You're calculating what you're going to do with your actions. Of course, running is a great way to get across the board very quickly, but you can't do anything else. Once you declare you're going to run, you spend all your action points that you have left and get those 3 extra movement points, and that's it, your turn's over. Again, going back to the setup, depending on how many players are playing, you're going to set up the board differently. And sometimes setup can take quite a bit of time because you're sorting through gems, because there's X amount of this color gem on the first 3 boards and X amount of that same gem on the 4th board. And then there's the tokens. Again, I'm talking about the prototype. It may be different with the final version, but a lot of the tokens are the same shape, same color. For example, the level up and tribute tokens. And so deciphering which one's which while you're setting up is a bit awkward. Everything's a little bit, the tokens are a little bit more dark on the board, although the art and the color of the board looks fine and you can distinguish everything fine. It's just when you place the tokens on, they kind of get lost. So going into gameplay, gameplay is fluid. As I said, with 3 players, the game moved along at quite a good speed. Once players have picked up the rules pretty quickly. Your first game, you probably will be referring back to the rule book from time to time because there's so many intricate little bits going on, like what happens when your score marker gets past a certain point. What do you take? One of the level up tokens, or do you collect a gem? And then what happens when your score track gets to the end? Sometimes you forget and you have to remember what happens if you do this, what happens if you do that, because there are a lot of things. There's the tributes, there's the amulets that you can collect, the gems. There are special spaces where the gem, you pick it up and you can remove a curse. But if you forget to look closely at the board, that space is for that, you can miss out on essentially points, so to say. So apart from that, your second, your third and your 4th game should run fluidly, and ours did run fluidly. The game, once players had dissected what happens from phase to phase, the game just ran and it played very, very quickly. There was very little downtime due to the fact that it was a case, okay, I'm going to play this trap, I'm going to play that trap. And then it was a case of, hey, yeah, you've taken some damage, and oh, I've got this, I've got more gems than you, ha ha. It was a fun experience. It's a fun family experience. It's a little bit heavier than a normal kind of family game. I wouldn't say it was as heavy or calculatory as, say, 5 Tribes, but it's definitely heavier than Ticket to Ride. So it's somewhere in the middle there. And again, depends on which version you play, if you play the light version or the hard version. Now we get to the leveling up. This of your characters. This is quite a nice idea. Once you've done a tribute, you get to take this token and add it to your player board, and it will give you an amulet the first level. Second level, it give you another amulet, or it'll allow you to lay a second trap for the round, which is great. And then there's the third level. Once you get the third one, you have this permanent power. Unfortunately, some of these powers feel a little too powerful compared to some of the other characters. So the game is not purely a race to get from one side to the other. There is that whole calculation of which gems should you get, because each different gem has a different value. Luckily, there's a reference sheet to remind you, and that's another good reason not to look into the rulebook. There's a lot of things that need referencing, and so luckily there will be on hand help sheets to remind you, because this is the important part. What does this amulet do? How much is this gem worth? Is it worth me going to get it? Maybe you can use that gem to use it onto a tribute to get you extra points. There are all these things. Again, if you're playing with a leveling up, it's worth getting the tributes to level up, because that third power could be very, very useful to you. There is the map pieces, which is another kind of like element of the game. Once you have two matching, well, not matching, but different map pieces, a circular map piece and a triangular map piece, and you cross them across, you can find out the location of where the shards are. And the shards of the Jaguar are massive points, so finding them is a big step forward in your game. And so that is important. I mean, you could just spend the game just picking up the map pieces before everyone else does, but then you'll be missing out on the other things. The game kind of does feel very kind of equal in that sense that you could do this or you could do that. You can go for amulets, you can go for crystals, you can go for tributes, you can go for map pieces. But then there's that element of your life points. And if you're unlucky enough to keep falling into traps, that could sour your experience of the game and put you back on the track, especially if nobody's falling into your traps. Because again, that's another kind of like free way of getting points. When someone falls into your trap, yay, I get a point. Two people fall into my trap, yay, I get 2 points. But it's not actually 2 points, because this point track goes up in increments of 3. And if you manage to get to the end of it, your token goes back to the beginning, and then it goes up in increments of 5. Wow. Now the theme seems to work with this game. Kind of, you know, you don't have no choice but to be nasty to the other players. So if you are kind of like a kind of laid back person who doesn't like to hurt other players and profit off of their pain, this might not be for you. But if you like that kind of like backstabbery thing, much like in like Survive Escape from Atlantis, then you will gonna enjoy this because of that. You know, trying to outthink players and think, okay, they're gonna do that on their turn. They want that piece over there, so they're gonna move 1, 2, 3, and they're gonna stop there on 4. So I'm gonna put this trap, and they're gonna fall into it. There's that kind of mentality to the game where you are deliberately trying to outsmart your opponents and also try to bluff at what you want to go for, and that works really well. The amulets lend their little powers here and there, which can surprise you from time to time. You know, you think that the character's going there, and they've actually used a walk-through wall amulet to actually get to their destination and go a bit further, and so your earthquake trap didn't go as you planned. So there's lots of fun to be had with this kind of trying to outthink and also calculate yourself what is the best way to get across the board and get the best treasure. One part of the theme that I don't like is the fact that the characters are going against each other when it should be like a cooperative mission to try and find all of the shards and put them together and bring our chieftain back in the form of a Jaguar. Also, this kind of force field which blocks between 3/4 of the board to the last section of the board. This could have been a sci-fi game on a spaceship where you're sending in droids and there's a force field and you got to deactivate the force field to get to the last part, then get onto the escape shuttles to get off the ship and win the game. I don't know. It feels a bit like Clank in that respect. It's like, how far do you push yourself? How much treasure should you pick up? How fast should you run, so to speak? So there's that kind of Clank element to it. There's also that Survive Escape from Atlantis element to it, and it looks stunning. as I said, apart from the darkness of the tokens, which get a bit lost, and the iconography is pretty good. Again, could do with enlarging and a bit more cleaning up, but again, this is prototype, and so I'm sure that will happen with time. So there you go. That's my first impressions of this family style game, Shards of a Jaguar. Shards of the Jaguar, which you can find on Kickstarter. The link is in the show notes below. Check out everything that they're doing. If there's make any changes to what you've seen here as well. If they're going to like upgrade the components. If they could do a modular board as well. This board is not a modular board for this prototype, but hopefully there'll be a modular board so every game will be different. So yeah, go and check that out on Kickstarter if you like the look of that. As I said, it's a family style game where you are backstabbing and trying to collect as much treasure as possible. And that's all from me. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you know someone that might appreciate this game, share this video with them. Give them a nudge. Say, go check out this Kickstarter. This was for you, my boy or my girl. And if you want to check out everything else that I've been up to in the board game world, you can check out all my board game reviews and Kickstarter preview videos on boardgameseverybodyshould.com, along with our podcast, Berkey and Badger's Board Game Babble, and also along with all the soundtracks that I am producing for Sirenscape, and also some board games themselves like Titan and Kemet, and coming soon, the 7th Citadel. So I say thank you very much for watching, ciao for now, and please remember to play nice with each other, because the last thing you want is a Jaguar in your soup.
Just sitting at the table next to Felicia would be quite nice. Wouldn't it be good? I got some board games.